comparing every Jane Eyre adaptation based on the Rochester scale. I really like Jane Eyre, a lot. Nearly a decade ago, I powered through that book in one sitting like it was my job, and ever since I've been searching for a story that hit me in that same way that this one did. You might ask yourself what makes it so great. It scratches every itch of wish fulfillment. Jane suffers so much, but at every turn she finds justice and vindication. I'm assuming you clicked on this because you also love the book. But if not, I'm going to spend just a bit of time going through the story at a very superficial level. So go ahead and peel those peepers and open your ears for the following. Jane is an unloved orphan who is sent to school with meager conditions. She watches a friend die, but ultimately becomes an accomplished young teacher. Jane gains employment as a governess at Thornfield Hall, there to teach the equally orphaned Adele Varens. Adele is a ward of Edward Rochester, and in some versions it is implied that she is his illegitimate child, but in others that she is simply the child of a former lover who has died. In any case, the spoiled and likely traumatized French-speaking girl immediately adores our Jane, who, of course, speaks perfect French. Why wouldn't she? Rochester and Jane develop a romance based on her being a very odd, fairy-like girl, and him being an extremely cranky but eloquent man. I always wanted to think it was because she painted moody watercolors about women drowning, but since his love for her is at first sight, it might be because she's just so small and so spooky. Rochester pretends to court Blanche Ingram, who is really mean to Jane because she hates governesses, but eventually he stops torturing Jane and asks her to marry him. It is revealed that all of the strange going-ons at Thornfield are because Rochester had been coerced into marrying a crazy heiress from Jamaica, and she's been trapped up on the top floor with an alcoholic caretaker. A truly tragic story, and while the reader is intended to sympathize with her awful fate, this part of the story really ages it. Betrayed at the altar, Jane literally runs away, packs up and runs in one direction until she faints. She just so happens to faint on the doorstep of who turns out to be her own relatives, the Rivers. While in their care, she becomes a teacher at a girls' school and finds out that her estranged uncle has left her a fortune he gained in Madeira, which she splits with her newfound family because Jane is just too good. St. John Rivers asks her to marry him and become a missionary's wife, but Jane is very aware that she would die in a foreign climate because she's just too delicate. And also, St. John honestly sucks. Even by Charlotte Bronte standards, this man is too religious. Jane runs back to Thornfield and finds out that it had burned to the ground. Turns out the crazy wife didn't take too kindly to Rochester's attempt at bigamy and decides to end her own tragic tale. She sets fire to the estate and then jumps to her death. While trying to save her, Rochester falls and is blinded, losing an eye and a hand. Jane is pleased to find her brooding romantic interest completely dependent on her, and they get married. He is retired from the world and wants a life of solitude with a woman he loves, and she wants that too. He's so happy to be a dad, he regains vision in his remaining eye, and they live happily ever after. St. John dies on his mission, just like he wanted. No, really, that's the end of the story. So you got it? Good. So I wanted to take you through some adaptations of Jane Eyre and break them down by rankings that I am sure make total sense and are not complete nonsense. Oh, tiered rankings of things was a trend on YouTube 6 months ago? Doesn't matter. In this video, we're going to be talking about these versions, hereafter referred to by the year of release, because literally they always have the same name. In 1983, we have Timothy Dalton and Zella Clark. 1996's Jane Eyre has Charlotte Gainsborough and William Hurt. 1997 has Samantha Morton and Kieran Hines. 2006 with Ruth Wilson and Toby Stevens. And in 2011, the most recent entry is Michael Fassbender and Mia Wasikowska. And just like the title of this video has indicated, we're going to be using a Rochester scale here. I'm going to go through all the Rochesters and break them down based on how good I think they are, and then for the remainder of this video, we'll be placing where things fall within their rankings based on the Rochester scale. So, let's look at these Rochesters. So we're going to go from 1 to 6, or usually what you see is S, A, B, C, D, and F. We don't have 6, so we're going to figure out what we're going to do with that F. So at the top of our ranking, we have Timothy Dalton. Mwah, fine art. This man is a Bond alum and known to childhood me for having been in Flash Gordon as a really hunky guy in an all-green outfit, which, if you're wondering how I became the goblin I am, it's probably because I really enjoyed Flash Gordon and thought characters in it were hunky. Dalton is brooding, but also fun, which is a balance that I think this character really needs. Number 2, we have Toby Stephens. I actually originally placed him behind Fassbender, but then I rewatched the 2006 version, and I knew that that wasn't right. He manages to be this very dark and brooding Rochester without having the discomfort of a too distant age gap. What you're going to see is it's difficult for him to be the way he's supposed to be as the character, and not making it gross. Because as it's written, there's an over 20-year age gap between these characters. Then number 3, we have Michael Fassbender. What can I say? He's cute. He's cute. I like him. I enjoy his scenes with Jane, and I think he looks really great in the role, but sometimes he just doesn't really connect with Wasikowska, and so that's why he's kind of going to be in that 3rd place ranking. Then we have William Hurt, and I thought I would find his performance the least likable because of how old he looks compared to Jane, but I was surprised by how he was portrayed. A lot of the work ends up being done by the supporting cast, but his changeability feels genuine, and he's given a tragic backstory that you don't normally see. And then we have Ciarán Hinds. Hinds is a great actor who's had a great career, but he feels odd in this role. The very first scene, his voice has such an awful, angry nasal to it that it's really hard to imagine him as a romantic interest. I almost stopped watching several times because he just made me uncomfortable. And like I mentioned, we don't have an F or last place rank just because of the number of versions we decided to look into. And so, in last place, representing that F Rochester, we're going to have the fortune teller scene. So that's my F rank, is the fortune teller scene. I hate it. When it's in an adaptation, I skip the scene, and I don't read it in the book. And it's not because it, triggers me, it's because it's so awkward. How does she not know it's him? So now we have our scale of Rochesters. Let's start going through the rest of the story and see how they stack up. Mia Wasikowska is Jane in the 2011 version of Jane Eyre. She has a face for gothic fiction, and the way that she struggles with her passions and her attractions to Rochester is, really cool. I think it's very well done, and she looks great in the role. I usually like her whenever she's in 2010 Alice in Wonderland notwithstanding. So she's kind of middle of the pack for me. Didn't do a bad job by any means. So we're going to put her right here. And let's go with the theme of going back in order chronologically. So then we have Ruth Wilson from the 2006 BBC Masterpiece Theatre version. Ruth does a really great job. She really captures the wild, fairy-like otherworldliness of Jane. The scenes where she's lost in the moors are just so beautiful, it looks like a painting. And a lot of that has to do with just the way that she handles the physicality of the role. Ruth Wilson, much like Toby Stephens, is going to be pretty close to the top for me, so we're going to put her right here with Toby. She's cozy there. And then we go to the 1997 version, and that's Samantha Morton. I don't hate her. She's not the worst Jane. And there's actually some things I really like about her. She has a very impish quality to her, and I think that rather than casting Jane as this exotic, mysterious beauty, she's, plain, and I do like that about it, but her scenes with Ciarán are so bad. The way that she shows her attraction to him or tries to depict chemistry just doesn't sit well. I don't like it. Not about it. We're going to put her right here. And then we have the 1996 version, Charlotte Gainsborough. I think she's French, so I think I should be saying her name different, but I've tried to say it right and I can't. I really wanted to like her, but she was so outshined by Anna Paquin as childhood Jane that I really don't know why she's in the role. I don't know what the thought process was there. I haven't even looked into it. I should probably look into it, but I'm pretty sure she's French, and you can hear her accent, and it's there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not really the role. So, and then we go all the way back to 1983, and look, I get it. I'm obvious and predictable, but My number one Jane is Zella Clark. There's just something about like the maturity of her facial features and her personality that is so genuine. Her Jane is very faithful to the book. She is plain and small, but she has such a warmth and depth of character to contrast with her direct nature and passionate beliefs. She's sweet. Like, she's a very sweet Jane, and the way she plays off Timothy Dalton is amazing. So yeah, Zella, girl, you are in first place. And you cannot have a Jane Eyre adaptation without a four-legged plot device, which is Pilot. Pilot is Rochester's dog. We can do that one chronologically as well. So in the 2011 version, it's the wrong dog breed, barely in the movie. I feel like they were just kind of like, oh shoot, we have to have a dog. So, 2011, you're over here at the bottom. In the 2006 version, however, very fluffy hound. I love him in all the scenes he's in. Does a lot of fake outs, like who's really wandering the castle, lots of Jane opening the door, and there's this cute wire-haired dog. That being said, he is not the right kind of dog, and that bugs some people, so I never thought I would say that where I rank a dog might be controversial, but that might be controversial with some people. The 1997 version, is there even a dog in the movie? It's the right breed, but, doesn't even show up. Oh, we have to have the dog on this scene, I guess we'll have the dog. It doesn't really feel like they cared about Pilot, and I don't think he gets a chance to shine. 1996, it's some sort of shepherd, and it shows up more than necessary for the plot. And when you consider how much they stripped from the story, they took out huge chunks of the story, the whole story arc about her running away, completely removed. But this dog gets some serious screen time, so, I love it when other people love a dog. Again, not the right breed, but a very good boy. So it's gonna go right there. And the 1983, it's the right colors, but it's not the right dog breed. Not really present. There's this cute picture of Timothy Dalton with a dog, and that's about all I've got for you. All right. Much like Pilot, you must have a Mrs. Fairfax. She is the housekeeper for Thornfield Hall, and in some versions, she is the housekeeper for Thornfield Hall. Sometimes she kind of plays the part of other characters just to save you from having to meet extra people. And sometimes she really takes a back seat, but she's always kind of portrayed as this protector of Jane and somebody from her own class who is looking out for her. Let's change it up. Let's go in the correct chronological order. In 1983, this is a fine Mrs. Fairfax. She hits all the right beats, and this is definitely the most faithful adaptation of the five. The whole series is very faithful to the book. But it's okay, she's got a bonnet, she's got some keys, cool. Very functional Mrs. Fairfax. In 1996, Joan Plowright is probably my favorite and a real surprise. She does a lot to establish the why behind Rochester's personality, and I love her costume design in this version. She is important throughout the entire movie, post-Lowood, and does a lot of work standing in for other characters, because this is, like I said, the most annotated version, and she fits. I just really love her performance, and I was not expecting to like anything about the 1996 version, so... In 1997, I feel like she's in this ranking only because this is my least favorite version. I'm sorry, Mrs. Fairfax. 2006 is Lorraine Ashbourne. I really like her, and I had to look her up because she wasn't familiar to me, but I did enjoy her performance. She's also the last one I bothered to look up on IMDb of the versions I watched, so kind of tells you why some of these ladies don't have much to be said. And then we have the 2011 version with Dame Judi Dench, of all people. What can I say? She's an icon. And it's really wonderful to see someone with star power in that role because the director really cared about her performance. But at the same time, I do kind of feel like he didn't do enough with her. And then, of course, there's Lowood. We gotta talk about that. We gotta talk about Baby Jane, Jane's childhood. How did that go? Depending on the version, some of these movies treat her childhood the way I do when I reread the book. They're just trying to get through it because it's important. And I can't blame them. I mean, You know, it's even a joke of, oh yeah, I usually skip the beginning of Jane Eyre when I reread it, so it's understandable. But it is an important part of the story and explains a lot of her personality and her values. So if you're too casual with it, the story does hurt because of it. So we will now go back in time and we'll start with 2011. Amelia Clarkson. She stood out the least for me, and I feel like she looked so little like Wazakowska that it was weird. Like, I had a hard time imagining her grow up to be the person that she's supposed to be. Then in 2006, we have Georgie Henley of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe fame. I wish she looked more like Ruth Wilson, but I do enjoy her performance. I loved her in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, probably because Lucy was always the character that I related to the most. But she does a great job in this. They go to great lengths to illustrate her imagination, and so you have some like really visually interesting scenes in a part of the story that's really just kind of like skimmed over. 1997, Laura Harling didn't do a bad job by any means, and is ranked ahead for looking more like adult Jane than other versions. I think it's just hard to do her justice in a movie that spends very little time during this part of the story. 1996, I really like how they portrayed her as a girl. Anna Paquin does a great job, and the suffering that they go through is solid, but there's no redemption at the end. Lowood is not changed, and the girls are not better fed, and even poor Miss Temple is apparently doomed to be trapped at Lowood forever, which isn't the end she's supposed to have. And then we have 1983. This is a very strong-willed and bossy Jane. As always, this version stands out because it does pay attention to the entire story and make sure all the beats are hit. And there's a guilty part of me that, does always skip. So when I saw how many episodes that were dedicated to this part of her story, I was kind of like, oh, get me to the Rochester part. But they do a really good job. Now it's time to talk about chemistry. So let's start with 2011. There is some criticism that there are moments where it seems like they're just reciting their lines, and I get that. But Fassbender is a powerhouse in this role, and Wazakowska emotes beautifully. I really like them together. It's not gonna be in the first place for me ever, but it doesn't hurt this version at all. In 2006, Toby Stephens and Ruth Wilson have really great chemistry, and they have some really gut-wrenching emotional moments together. They definitely play up how difficult it is for Jane to resist Rochester sexually, which I don't necessarily need in an austere period romance, but it's not a bad take by any means, and it, again, doesn't take away from it. That's just a personal preference, and I still rank this one really highly. Then in 1997, their chemistry should be illegal. My feelings about this version are not controversial, but I almost stopped this movie so many times because Kieran performed this almost deranged monster of a Rochester. And the way his voice sounds when he yells, Morton has, like I said earlier, this really cool impish personality, but the way that she shows that she's aroused is such eye poison, especially against such an older performer. Ugh. You were probably wondering why I had an F rank because I wasn't using it, but yeah, it's because of their romance, and it's just about as bad as the fortune teller scene. In 1996, I have to put this one somewhere. I was originally really nervous to watch this version because I felt like Hurt looked too old, and I'd already been burned by the 1997 version, but I was surprised to see that they did pretty okay against each other, and Hurt has some performances that help distract how middling I feel Gainsborough is in the role. And here I am again, being predictable. 1983, far and away the best. Like I mentioned, there is the smallest age gap between these two actors. Timothy Dalton was in his late 30s and Zella Clark was in her late 20s. So you don't get that feeling that you need to worry about them, like poor Mrs. Fairfax. Some of these versions, I'm sitting there like, eek, don't be alone with that man, he could be your dad. But that isn't how this version feels at all. And it's a really sweet, I just enjoy it. It's a very good version of the love story, and it really makes this version stand out. Obviously I like both of the actors portraying these roles, but this version is old, and the production values are not great, but their chemistry together is what makes this version a lot of people's favorites, and myself included. I wasn't expecting to like this version as much as I do. And now let's look at the Rivers. In 2011, they did fine. At least we get both sisters. Sometimes they just cut one of them out for convenience. I guess it's I don't know, save money, budget river sisters. And St. really looks his part. He's kind of short, which I normally wouldn't even notice, but like, isn't Jane supposed to be really small herself? Such a nitpick. This one is middle of the pack, but not bad by any means. 2006, they spend a lot of time with the Rivers in this version, and do a lot to depict how loving and wonderful they are as a new family for Jane. St. looks very much like an unfun and overly serious missionary. He's kind of terrifying because of it, and that's why I like his depiction the most. I've always felt like St. is supposed to be terrifying. He represents a complete denial of her personhood, and there's a reason why she leaves him and chooses Rochester. So, definitely top of the pack for me. 1997. Come on, stop kicking the second sister out of the story. They do try to stick to the story with this one, and St. is perfectly fine. Most of the performances in this movie are totally acceptable, and at least this part of the story gives you a break from the chemistry. 1996. This movie completely changes their role in the story and puts St. in the role of the lawyer, who's usually pretty important to the plot, but very briefly in any version. So, actually, we're going to put them in F as well, because, I mean, come on. That's so important to Jane's journey as a character, and it makes the end of this movie so unsatisfying. 1983. Like always, this version takes its time in all of the story beats, so they get a full 2.5 episodes. I enjoy the sisters, and St. is a very serious and demanding potential husband. So here you go, second place. And I also wanted to run through some honorable mentions. This is a category of things that aren't necessarily linked, and we're not going to be going through all of the movies, but they're just some aspects of all these different versions that I thought would be important to cover. These don't quite qualify for an entire ranking of each version, but they did stand out, good or bad, so I wanted to include them. 2011. Jane's drawings in this version are just really cool and look like something I would have posted to Tumblr during my moody artiste phase when I was 20. No complaints here. I think this version really understands the purpose of her art. In 2006, we also get a good showcase of Jane's drawing ability. Jane is a technically very skilled portraiture artist, which, depending on Rochester's assessment of her work, makes this one feel like they kind of missed the point. The whole point of her art, in my opinion, is that she draws these very strange, moody images. But it's nice to see. Bad portraits in movies and television always make me cringe. Her self-portrait of herself is really good. Check out how you can see the actress is just clumsily scribbling over something that another artist made. I know that's how these kind of things are always shot, but it's always just really funny for me to see. 1996 standout is Anna Paquin's really bad wig when she gets her hair cut off. It's just so bad. Why did they even do that? 2006, the imagery in this movie, they really went all out. The scenes in Lowood and just the general ambiance of Thornfield Hall, the murals behind Helen when she's passed, it's just really pretty. This is a beautiful adaptation, which, considering this came out in a time when the BBC was really ramping up their production quality, it's not surprising that this one is placed pretty high for me, but I do think it needs to be mentioned. It's a beautiful version of this story. 2011, the setting, the cinematography, it's just so beautifully filmed. Obviously, it being a major theatrical release, this isn't a shock, but it does need to be mentioned just how stunning this movie is, especially from a cinematography perspective. If anything else, just watch this movie because it's eye candy. It's not going to have the strongest performances, it's not going to blow you away, but it is a worthwhile 2 hours of your life. 1997, Ciarán Hinds falling off of his horse and yelling. I actually stopped the movie and closed the program I was watching it, and it took me 30 minutes to summon the courage to watch it. I was like, I have to watch this version. Oh, so bad. So that's it, guys. This has been my first YouTube video. I don't know if it's extremely obvious. It probably is. I learned a lot in the process. How to record audio, how to capture screen recordings while I play around in Photoshop. I drew this picture of Jane that I didn't end up using. I don't know why I drew it. I didn't use it anywhere. But I had a lot of fun, and I think that this is something that I want to keep doing. It scratches my itch of over-researching anything I enjoy. I'm always really quick to open up Wikipedia and IMDb when I'm watching something that I like, learn about the actors and other things they've been in, learn about the story, all that stuff. I really enjoy it. I don't think I'm going to stick to film. I think I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things. And I can't promise you that there will be any discernible theme for the time being as I figure myself out. But if you enjoyed the video, it would mean so much to me if you could leave a comment, thumbs up if you feel like it, subscribe, I guess. I feel really weird asking for that, especially since this is the only thing that's going to be on the channel for now. Any feedback is greatly appreciated as I figure out this process, and I just want to say thank you for watching, and, I hope you never see anything as terrible as Kieran Hines kissing Samantha Morton.
Are you all right, sir?
Look as though I'm all right.